shift, so I've tried to keep it very minimal. I've literally got 4 slides. So, as was said, I'm an industrial psychologist, and to give context, sort of what inspired the topic of today's talk is I did grow up in a household where my mother was in the healthcare industry and my father was in the IT industry. And as I got older, it sort of stirred up questions in my head. Firstly, the vast difference in work environments, but both organizations, both employees are bound by the same basic conditions of employment. But it started to raise questions about how do you define success at work? How do you define stress at work? A good day at work versus a bad day at work? Do you see the difference that already is coming to mind between the two? And it sort of sparked a bit of a fascination. And I was very fortunate when I was completing my master's to kind of explore this fascination. I wanted to understand a little bit more about the healthcare industry because it's so different to all my friends' parents' jobs as well. And since my master's, I've just tried to learn more about the topic. I've tried to raise awareness just by talking about it. And that's how this all came about. But like I said, I'm not going to bombard you with definitions. I'm not going to bombard you with stats. I'm preaching to the choir. I know you all know that there is a problem, that the industry is rife with stress, burnout, pressure. There's also good things too, but the news is generally bad. So what I did was I just Googled the word well-being. So it's a simple definition, you can Google it yourself. And the first thing that pops up is that it is a state of comfort, it's a state of feeling happy, and it's a state of feeling healthy. But in that definition, can you see how personal and unique it is to every person? If we look at how people define success, for example, some define it through financial means, some define it through legacy that they leave behind, some define it through the relationships that they create throughout their life. But it's very unique, very individual, very subjective, very personal. And it's the same with well-being as well. So I'd like you to keep that in mind throughout the talk. But now that we're on the same page, I think this would be a good point to sort of use our cards. And let's go with green, because the presentation is green and it's my favorite color. Okay, so my first question, just to get things rolling, nice and simple. Who's feeling brave today? Okay. Good response, seeing as we are at a brave conversations topic. Okay, secondly, in well-being, I like to use the analogy of pouring from an empty cup. Okay, literally, you cannot pour from an empty cup, nothing's going to come from it. So it also speaks to what was previously said. You yourself need to have all the personal resources in yourself, you need to feel fulfilled before you can give to others. Look at the nature of your industry. The nature of your industry is to help others. So generally, we need to keep our cups full. Okay? So now, this is going to lead to a question. How many of you, let's say in the last 3 months, can honestly say that you've been operating with an empty cup? You've been pouring from an empty cup. You felt burnt out, fatigued, exhausted for a few days straight, not just having one bad day, but consecutively. Okay. Thank you for the honesty. I thought I was going to have to argue this. Okay, so now my next question. How many of you have seen others, whether it be your colleagues, your superiors, friends within the industry, pouring from an empty cup? Okay, this is interesting. Slightly more hands. So now my last question is, how many of you in this room believe that there is a stigma for talking about your mental health or well-being? You're making my job easy. Again, thank you for being brave and thank you for the honesty. I think that's my point, is that there is a stigma around talking about our well-being and our health. Research, there's not a lot on it, but there's various reasons as to why this is so. It could be because of a macho career, you have the superhero complex, you feel that by expressing your emotions you'll be weak, but as we saw previously, emotional intelligence is an intelligence. Okay, so it's very real, very relevant. How do we combat stigma? Unfortunately, the only way to combat it, to eradicate it, is to face it head on and to actually talk about it. I don't want to just talk about it though. My goal is to start a movement. We don't just start the conversation, but to keep the momentum going so that it's not weird, that it's not a thing that we have to get started. So you're probably wondering, what do I mean, start a movement? And again, this is a very big theoretical topic, but I found a TED Talk that actually sums it up really well, sums it up in 3 minutes. So it's short, sweet, but listen very carefully. There's a lot of really good points about starting a movement, the theory behind it, but also practically as well. So I'm going to ask you to sit back, relax, and watch the video.
So ladies and gentlemen, at TED we talk a lot about leadership and how to make a movement. So let's watch a movement happen, start to finish, in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons from it. First, of course you know, a leader needs the guts to stand out and be ridiculed. But what he's doing is so easy to follow. So here's his first follower with a crucial role. He's going to show everyone else how to follow. Now notice that the leader embraces him as an equal. So now it's not about the leader anymore, it's about them, plural. Now there he is calling to his friends. Now if you notice that the first follower is actually an underestimated form of leadership in itself. It takes guts to stand out like that. The first follower is what transforms a lone nut into a leader. And here comes a second follower. Now it's not a lone nut, it's not 2 nuts, 3 is a crowd, and the crowd is news. So a movement must be public. It's important to show not just the leader, but the followers, because you find that new followers emulate the followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, and immediately after, 3 more people. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point. Now we've got a movement. So notice that as more people join in, it's less risky. So those that were sitting on the fence before now have no reason not to. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, but they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. So over the next minute, you'll see all of the those that prefer to stick with the crowd, because eventually they would be ridiculed for not joining in. And that's how you make a movement. But let's recap some lessons from this. So first, if you are the type, like the shirtless dancing guy, that is standing alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals. So it's clearly about the movement, not you. Okay, but we might have missed the real lesson here. The biggest lesson, if you noticed, did you catch it? Is that leadership is over-glorified. That yes, it was the shirtless guy was first, and he'll get all the credit, but it was really the first follower that transformed the lone nut into a leader. So as we're told that we should all be leaders, that would be really ineffective. If you really care about starting a movement, have the courage to follow and show others how to follow. And when you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first one to stand up and join in. And what a perfect place to do that at TED. Thanks.
Okay, so that really sums up the key points in starting a movement. To summarize, the first thing that we note, and probably the most important, is just start. Be brave, be courageous, take the first step. You don't necessarily have to be the leader, but be the first follower. It makes as much of an impact. Secondly, it's all about the mission, not about the leader or the people involved. By defining a mission, making it clear and definitive, in that you get a collective identity or a shared context, and that's what drives the movement. And lastly, and probably most interestingly, in theory we say it's about surviving the victory. It's not about reaching each individual milestone, but to keep the momentum. That's what movement is all about. It's continuous, it doesn't stop. So to survive the victory and keep going. So now you're probably wondering, okay, a movement, but how do I start a movement? In industrial psychology, we do believe we're starting with the self, and it actually plays quite nicely to the previous talk as well, because we have direct control over our own thoughts and our own behaviors. So it's best to start right there. So this is not a model I created, it's just a general gap analysis, and it's as simple as 3 easy steps. So to focus on your well-being, to start the movement, it's as simple as 1, 2, and 3. Step 1, look at your current reality. So there's various tools that you can use. Some of you might have heard of something called the Wheel of Life, which breaks up your life into different spheres. For example, it could be professional, personal, financial, spiritual, whatever spheres of life you deem important. There's various other tools. You could just literally sit here and think about it. Think about, what does my current reality look like? What is a sphere of life where I currently feel I'm not fulfilled? Where is a sphere of life I'd like to put more energy and effort into because it makes me feel good? I think everyone here has one sphere of life that they think they could give more to. Not because they have to, but because they want to. It makes them feel good. So think about your current reality. Step 2. Where do I want to be? Now I want you to visualize what that sphere of life ideally looks like. So think the things that are missing, what do you want it to actually look like? Vividly imagine it. So again, there's various tools that you can do it. Things like vision boards, where you actually picture it, you can draw it yourself, you can write it down, but generally we like to say you take it internally and make it external. It's more likely to come true. But also, again, just create that vivid picture in your head. So now we've looked at where you are, where you want to be, and the last step, and probably the hardest, is how do I get there? I've tried to keep it simple. One concept, micro habits. And it's exactly what it says it is. Micro, small, habit, you do it so consistently it becomes routine, it becomes a habit. The idea for micro is that no excuse can be big enough for you not to do it. It must be so simple and so easy that you do it. So I'm going to give you an example to sort of bring this to life. Let's say, for example, a sphere of life I'd like to work on, because it makes me feel good, is I'd like to read more. I find myself not dedicating time anymore to reading, and I miss it, it makes me feel good. Ideally, what do I want that to look like? I want to be a bookworm again. I want to see myself in a tea break reading a book. I want to see myself on holiday taking a book and reading it. Why? Because I like learning from books. It helps me escape reality, whatever your reasons may be. So now I've identified where I am, where I want to be, how do I get there? And this is where people mess up. Make it as simple as reading a page a week. Some of you might laugh and think that that's really simple. That's the point. The point is, how can you not read one page a week? And the idea is, once you read that page, you'll probably find yourself reading page 2 and page 3. So again, it's about just getting started. It starts small. Small steps to climb the mountain, right? Okay, so let's bring it back to well-being. Everyone in this room acknowledged that they've been pouring from an empty cup at some stage. So today it might be at varying degrees. We might have people who are slightly stressed, slightly burnt out, slightly tired. You might have people who are on the extreme end of the stress spectrum, bordering PTSD and so on. Okay, so it doesn't matter where you are. Identify your current reality. What are you currently feeling right now? Identify where you want to be. I personally want to be the shirtless guy in the video. I want to feel free, I want to feel happy, and I want to feel me. Okay, how do I get there? Micro habits. So to make this relevant to all of you, you need to identify those things that genuinely make you happy, those things that recharge your batteries. So for some of you, that might be reading a book. Others, it might be getting outdoors and going for a hike. Others, it might be sitting in front of the TV and watching movies. It doesn't matter what it is, but recognize what those things are and put time aside and prioritize it. Small steps. Okay, is everyone with me? All right. But as an industrial psychologist, I also have to acknowledge that even though I say we should start with the self, because that's where we have direct control over our own behavior, we also lose objectivity with ourselves. I don't know how many of you feel that you often don't realize when you're tired and frustrated. It often takes you to get into the extreme end before you really realize, or someone tells you you're looking really bad. And then you start to reflect and think, yeah, actually I've had a rough couple of weeks. So it's natural, it's human. We generally lose objectivity with ourselves. That's why I call on you today to look out for each other. It's easier to see the signs and symptoms in other people than it is in ourselves. There's a lot of research you can Google. There's a lot of theoretical background on what are the signs and symptoms of stress, burnout, PTSD. But what I want to leave you with today is one simple thing. If you notice a drastic change in the person's behavior, generally something's wrong. If they were generally quite a quiet person and all of a sudden they're having a lot of anger outbursts, for example. If they are generally quite a loud person and all of a sudden they're very withdrawn. It's that drastic change in behavior. Generally something's wrong. So ask, are you okay? Let's get rid of the stigma. I actually wrote down what the previous speaker said. Stress makes us stupid, and being stupid makes you dangerous. So it's important. Okay. And then this statement I think is very appropriate just to try and harp on what I'm saying, is that even when you remove I and replace it with we, illness can become wellness. And that's so significant. So my hope today is that I don't leave here a lone nut. I hope I've gained at least one follower in trying to combat the stigma around talking about your well-being and your mental health. And I promise you, the more frequently you do it, the less big a deal it actually is. But it's okay not to be okay. So now I want to end off, get your green panels again, and I want to ask you. So who's still feeling brave?